every new habit feels like heavy lifting, if every new habit feels like so much work, it's going to feel really hard to stick to. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. My name is Brooks Herbis, and I'm an online fitness, nutrition, and mindset coach who's here to help you simplify and make sense out of the all too confusing fitness and nutrition industry. Let's be real, there's a lot of conflicting information online, and it can be hard to know what's legit and who to trust. In every episode, I'll be sharing the science and psychology behind health, fitness, and long-lasting behavior change. But I'll also be sharing real-life practical application, because all of the best info in the world only matters if you can actually apply it to your real life. So grab a coffee, water, glass of wine, or lace up your walking shoes, and let's dive in. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. I am super excited for today's episode because this is something that a lot of people want when we talk about fat loss and a healthy lifestyle and, sustaining these things long term. I often hear I just want this to feel easy. I want this to feel effortless. I want this to not be so much work. And when we think about fat loss, when we think about long-term behavior change, when we think about creating this overall healthy lifestyle, I do want to be clear that it can be hard. It is hard work to create a new life, to change your habits, to develop these new skills, especially if you don't have much of a foundation right now for healthy eating. Maybe you know how to eat healthy, or what you should do to be healthy, but what you're doing with your current lifestyle isn't set up for it. Maybe you're snacking through meals, you have a hard time getting to the gym, whatever it might be. Consistency often feels hard because right now you're trying to rely on motivation to do these habits. You're trying to just grit through and find willpower to show up. But something that we know is that having routines around health and fitness behaviors can make it so much easier to start building these habits and doing these things consistently. And these routines that you're creating as you're on your fat loss journey, as you're on this journey to building a healthy lifestyle, this is how we get to that place of effortless. At the end of the day, being healthy still takes some work. You still have to choose to show up to the gym. You still have to choose to eat the healthy meals and make them. It still takes a little bit of effort, but when we have these really solid routines and we have consistency around them and we start to build these habits, it can start to get to that place of feeling effortless. You're still doing the work, you're still putting in the effort, it just doesn't feel as hard because it's so automatic. And a lot of these things maybe aren't obvious, or maybe you're not realizing just how helpful these things might be when it comes to long-term behavior change. So today's podcast is all about that. How do we create these healthy habits to feel effortless? How do we create weekly routines that work for you so that we're not constantly relying on things like willpower and motivation? Because willpower and motivation, those are motivation, really specifically, is an emotion. And just like how we can't expect to be happy or sad or mad all the time, we also can't expect to be motivated all of the time. So these habits, these routines that we're going to talk about, these are going to make it easier for you to show up, and they're going to make continuing this lifestyle forever feel a heck of a lot easier. So what is the overall goal? When it comes to building habits, we want to reduce the friction as much as possible for getting us to do the actual thing. So in short, if every new habit feels like heavy lifting, if every new habit feels like so much work, it's going to feel really hard to stick to. So we need to start reducing some friction. Some really short examples of reducing friction is if it is really hard for you to make a healthy meal after work every day, we reduce the friction by prepping the protein in advance. We reduce the friction of eating healthy vegetables for a snack by cutting them up in advance. We reduce the friction of going to the gym by doing a home workout. Whatever it is, we just want to make sure that these habits, these routines, they feel easy to do. And in order for them to feel easier, we need to reduce that friction. And a lot of reducing this friction comes with planning, and it comes with some sort of prep. Really, we want to do the work in advance so that in the moment, there isn't much friction towards actually doing it. And I know that there's a big chunk of you that are probably feeling resistant towards this. Maybe you currently identify as someone who's a type B person. I don't know if anyone's seen that type B trend that's going around on TikTok right now. I always think it's so funny. It's like your type B friend's car, and the car is just like an explosion, or they've like lost their ID or something. I find it funny. I don't know. But if you're someone who identifies with that, you're someone who's like, well, I'm not a planner, or like, I'm just really type B, or that doesn't work for me. You might shy away from any sort of planning or routine. You might like want the flexibility, and that's great. We can still have flexibility. And I also fully understand that because a lot of my clients fall into this same boat. And one of my clients in particular, she was really struggling with consistency. She had a lot of routines in general, and she had gotten into like a really good groove with workouts, but she didn't yet have a solid routine around nutrition. Some weeks she would meal plan, other times she wouldn't. Some weeks she would pre-log her calories, other times she wouldn't. And she was kind of like, yeah, planning's helpful, but like, I like the flexibility. I like making these decisions in the moment. I like being able to just, have what I want for dinner on a whim. But at the start of the year, when she really looked at what were the goals that she wanted to hit in 2025 and what were the things that helped her be consistent in 2024, what she realized and what she identified was that this current strategy of having full flexibility, sometimes planning, sometimes not, it wasn't working for her. And we really needed to get specific about a few things that would make consistency in her nutrition easy moving forward. Because that's really how we be more consistent overall, is when this stuff feels easy. If at the end of every single day you're having to decide what to eat, you're having to log all of those calories, you're having to make a full meal, oh my gosh, of course that's exhausting. Of course we don't want to do that. So how can you make this easier for yourself? How can you reduce that friction? The easier you make this to follow through, the more consistent you're going to be, which means the more results you're going to have. So for that client specifically, it might be something different for you, and that's okay. That's the whole point of finding what works for you, and health and fitness being so individual is that we get to work together to find what specifically works for you. But for her, it was meal planning before the weekend because she knew she needed to shop on the weekend, then meal prepping on Sunday and getting all of her food, and she would also pre-log her meals that day. That way, before she even went into the week, not only did she have most of her dinners prepped so that when she was tired after work, she didn't have to make any food, but also most of her food was already logged. She didn't even have to think about logging anything extra in her calorie tracking app. It was done for her. So all of a sudden, instead of having to make all these individual decisions all day long, instead of having to rely on the willpower, rely on the motivation, instead of having to really feel exhausted with the effort of staying consistent, she had already done all the work. If she just ate what she made and ate what she had already logged, she was going to be consistent the whole week. She didn't have to put any effort into it. She didn't have to think about any meals. She didn't have to plan anything. It was done for her. And since she has put this routine in place around meal planning, prep, pre-logging, she has gotten so much more consistent overall. Like, she went from maybe like a 60% consistency for the month to 80 to 90% consistent every single month, every single week, really, because this is all feeling so much easier. It's feeling so much more effortless for her. So in order for you to reduce the friction on your own goals and your own consistency, you need to find the weekly routines that are going to work for you. And a few ideas might be things like ingredient prep. So instead of prepping full meals, maybe you're just prepping the protein every single week. Or maybe you're cutting up the vegetables that you need to add to your salad every single week. Just prepping a few ingredients that you can easily throw together to make meals in the moment. Maybe it's things like grocery pickup or delivery, reducing the friction of actually going to the store and shopping and carving out that hour. Maybe it's having a strength training program that's already written for you so that you can just show up and do it. You don't have to spend all this time trying to find a workout and decide what you're going to do. You just show up to the gym and do the work. Maybe, like that client, it's meal planning every single week. So you don't have to make all those in-the-moment decisions about what you're eating and trying to rely on willpower to make the healthy decision every time. Whatever it is, I want you to find at least a few of these to reduce the friction for your own goals to help you increase the consistency. Remember, the goal of reducing the friction is what are the things that are going to make it easy for you during the week? What are the things that are going to make consistency feel a heck of a lot easier and to not feel like so much work? So really think about that. What are 1 to 2 things you can start doing every single week that make it feel so easy to hit your nutrition and your workout goals? And if this is something you really want to work on, my free fat loss challenge starts next week, and we don't just focus on what to eat or how to work out. I'm going to show you how to actually stick to these things by setting up routines that make them all feel easier. So if you want a little bit of help digging into this, sign up for the free challenge in the show notes. We're getting started next week. Now, I know you might, again, be feeling some resistance to the idea of planning or some routines. You might be saying, like, I don't have time for meal planning or prep. Like, I don't even have time to cook one meal in the evening. How am I supposed to have time to cook an entire week's worth of meals? One, I would say you don't have to cook an entire week's worth of meals. There are lots of different ways to meal prep, but meal prepping in some way, meal planning in some way, actually saves you so much time during the week. My clients who start doing this notice that the time they're spending on cooking and prepping and all of that significantly reduces when they spend a little bit of time doing it one day. So thinking you don't have time to meal plan or prep, it's actually going to save you so much time. Number 2, you might be saying, I really like variety. I don't like eating the same thing every single day. I don't want a meal plan. These plans don't have to be super rigid. You can give yourself flexibility within the plan. So even something like, I'm going out to dinner on Wednesday night, that can be part of your meal plan. Or you could give yourself a couple different options. Like, you can still find ways to make this your own and give yourself some flexibility in a way that feels good for you, while still having some sort of loose blueprint that makes consistency feel easier. Maybe you're someone who's saying, I get bored of the same workouts. I like to just show up and do what I'm feeling. Totally get it, but having a plan is what gets you results. Truly, if we are just going off of vibes every time we step into the gym, we're probably not following any sort of program that's rooted in progressive overload, which means it's going to take you a heck of a lot longer to reach your goals. So if you're trying to maximize your time in the gym, if you're someone who is really busy, I really recommend following a program to stick to it. We can still sprinkle in the fun exercise that we really enjoy. We can do the group fitness classes and the hot girl walks and whatever it is, but at the end of the day, having some sort of plan, having some sort of baseline is going to allow you to be a lot more consistent. If you're in general listening to all of this and you're saying this feels like too much work, I don't want to pre-log, I don't want to plan, I don't want to prep, it is work at first. It is weekly work. And even as a coach, there are weeks where it is the last thing that I want to do. But like I said, losing fat and maintaining it takes some sort of effort, and it can feel easier as time goes on, but it still is going to feel a little bit like effort. And there is a learning curve to any new habit or skill. But once you do it, and once you keep doing it, it gets easier and easier. So are you okay putting in a little bit of work, knowing that it's going to make hitting your goals overall feel so much easier? Or do you kind of want to say that it's just too much work and you don't want to do it? The great thing about being a human is that you get to decide. If you decide that it's too much work, you don't have to do any of this. But if you decide that your goals are really important to you and you want to make these changes, everything I just outlined in this podcast is going to make that feel so much easier. We need to start reducing the friction to being consistent, to hitting your daily goals. And in order to do that, things like meal planning, having a program written for you, prepping your ingredients, those can be a huge help, even if they might feel like more effort in the beginning. So as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I always appreciate you being here, listening every single week. If you're looking to learn how to make fat loss feel easier this year, don't forget to join my free 3-day challenge that is happening in March. You can join right here in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.